Innovate.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. We're here. We're going to discuss the human take on synchrony in business. We'll share about how human connection happens on a neural level, what the benefits are when we synchronize with others, and how this can be applied to the business realities we live in every day to spark growth. I'm Bart. I'm joining from close to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and I'm a business humanizer and cultural decoder at Innate Motion. I have a background in social and cultural psychology, which has given me this passion for looking at human topics from a lot of different viewpoints.
And everyone, I'm Megan. It's great to see you. I'm also a business humanizer at Innate Motion, and I'm joining from Seville, Spain. My background is in journalism and neuroscience. So, what I really love is to understand the details about what makes people tick, what their motivations are behind the scenes, and then turn that into impactful storytelling to help businesses grow. So, from the neuroscience side of things, today we're going to talk about synchrony, which is a topic I feel very passionate about, because I feel, and I think many of us feel, that humanity is very out of sync lately. And when I first started researching this topic, I actually did it with a focus on how can we use synchrony to reduce deep tensions and polarization. And even in the worst of cases like wars and hatred, we see that getting people to synchronize can help. So, to give you a preview of what we'll talk about today in the business context, first we'll discuss a bit about what synchrony is. Then we'll look at 3 areas where synchrony can set us up for business growth with 4 tips to bring that to life. And those areas are: how do we show up as individuals? That's the first thing we need to think about. Second is, how can we build synchrony into team dynamics? And finally, how can we engage with the people that we serve in our businesses from both an insights and a branding perspective?
Megan, why don't you kick us off by explaining why we started a business webinar with music from Queen?
Yes, I guess some people are wondering the same thing. It might have felt out of place, but it's a good morning song. And it's also an amazing example of synchrony at work. So if you imagine yourself in a group setting when this song comes on, it could be a sporting event or a wedding. Think about what happens. It's a great example of how synchrony through music can unite people behind a common cause. And the song itself, it's a synchrony song. It comes on and people start to clap their hands and go. So you get everyone in the room doing the same thing, and it's synchrony in action. And the very cool thing is that right now, even though we're virtual, we're in a webinar, we can't see each other at the moment, our brains should be a little more in tune with each other than they would have been without that song on. So let's talk a little bit about what is synchrony. This is what happens when people quite literally get on the same wavelength. So this happens biologically. Different signs in our bodies start to align on an emotional level and in a behavioral level. So it's this invisible rhythm that emerges when we feel like we're in tune with each other. Sometimes it shows up in these obvious ways like clapping or walking in unison, but other times it's really under the surface. It's happening in our brains, our heart rates align, and even our breaths start to align without us even realizing that it's happening. But we do feel it. And it's that sense of flow or clicking with someone. And it's something that we can observe and even design for.
Yeah, I think it's a feeling we've all experienced, right? So, as you said, we can observe it, and you already mentioned a bit like we can observe it physically, but also neurologically. So, can you explain how that works?
Yes, it's super cool. At least I think it is. Interbrain synchrony is what happens when our brain activity actually starts to align with someone else's. And we can see this by using brain imaging tools like EEG or fMRI, but we do this with something called hyperscanning, which is when we're observing the brain activity of 2 or more people at once.
Oh my God. Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I've seen in my studies being used, like EEGs and fMRI in research, but I hadn't seen this many people on an fMRI machine or EEG machine before.
Yeah, it's very cool. And the thing is that for a long time, neuroscience has been about one brain at a time because it's quite complicated to use these different techniques to see everybody at once. But we're social creatures and we don't exist in isolation. So looking at what happens between brains when we're interacting with each other, it's very enlightening. And this is a new field of research. So we're still learning a lot. There's a lot left to learn. But what researchers have seen so far is that when people are really connecting or working on something together, they start to experience neural coupling. And this is when their brain activity begins to mirror the other, like a neural duet. So, what you see on this page is a few examples of what it looks like. We won't go into these studies right now, but I think it's just cool to see what researchers see from their side. So, on the left, you can see images from a study called Teamwork, Team Brain, where they measured interbrain synchrony while people did this drumming task in the room using FNIRS. And the results showed that more accurate drumming occurred in the teams that experienced the most synchrony, even without a metronome. So that's pretty cool. They had different conditions so that they could test it in different cases. And on the right, we have some images from a study about team flow and interbrain synchrony. And in this one, they work to identify neural correlates of team flow. So what does that actually look like in the brain? Using a musical rhythm task with EEG hyperscanning. And in this one, they found that synchrony was higher in a flow state and it was associated with better outcomes in the shared task compared to those who weren't synchronized. So these are just two small snippets of the type of work that's happening. If anyone's interested, happy to pass you the links to the full studies. But I love it. I think it's so cool.
It's very cool and interesting to learn more about this. So, I wanted to say it's also common these days to hear that statement, "We are wired to connect," but
Mhm.
it's so incredible to then see how there's technology to show us exactly how it's happening and also why it matters. So, in fact, I think we want to do a quick check-in with everyone here today. So, when you think about the world around you and what you experience in your work, how are you feeling about the human side of business these days? We're going to launch a poll. It's going to be on a scale of 1 being never to 10 being all of the time. And think about the statement, "In my work, there is an emphasis on genuine human connection." While we wait, Megan, let's continue for a bit.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is coming up now more than ever because we're hearing so much about AI. And it's rightfully so because it's bringing massive change. But there's this question, is AI going to replace us? And I think it's fundamental to remember that people are social creatures. We need each other. We need to interact. And our survival is literally built on our ability to be interdependent.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was talking to some of my colleagues earlier this week as well that AI can't replace our human experience, especially bodily experience, right? And people still make up companies, and those companies still exist because it's people that engage with them. So connection still drives business performance, and that's on the inside and on the outside. So let's look a bit at the poll results. Everybody should be able to see them now. And it looks like, yeah, pretty good results, right? Many people are experiencing that emphasis on genuine human connections, but there's also still quite a lot of people that are, on that level that it can be more.
Mm. Yes, still something to keep very top of mind. And the nice thing is that it's something we can integrate into what we do. So,
Yeah. So, okay, for now, let's look into why synchrony matters for business then.
mhm. Well, here's where I think it gets really interesting. When people's brains are in sync, it's not just this cool neuroscience party trick. I mean, you're at a party, you're not going to see everybody's brains anyways, but it correlates with real outcomes that are essential for running a successful business. And here on the screen, you just see a list of some of these outcomes that have been associated with synchrony already. It supports things like joint attention, clearer communication, better decision making, more fluid cooperation, and also a stronger sense of empathy and understanding of the other people that you're working with. So it makes collaboration feel smoother, not because people are trying harder, but because something beneath the surface is aligning and clicking into place.
I mean, that's it. That's a lot of positive outcomes, and I feel that in work as well. So it's like having this sense of group flow. You're feeling in tune with each other, and therefore you can perform better.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a growing body of research to back this up. This meta-analysis, it's in the bottom left of this page, looked at 40 studies on interbrain synchrony and found a strong and consistent link between synchrony and stronger team outcomes. So this suggests that when people are more synchronized, they're more successful in whatever goal that they want to achieve.
Wow. Yeah, really cool to hear that research is aligning with what we see in the field too. Uh, I've worked with teams that just weren't clicking. Maybe there was a tension or a misalignment, or they just didn't know each other that well yet, right? And then when we introduce something that is fun, a shared story or a bit of movement, suddenly something can shift. So you feel that the trust builds, the energy changes, and then suddenly it feels like you're creating together.
Exactly. And I think that that also brings us to the chicken and egg question of this topic, which, that's part of what the research is there for, and we're still trying to understand. But does collaborating cause people to synchronize, or does synchrony cause people to better collaborate? What do you think, Bart?
I mean, based on what I've seen, I would say it can go both ways, but what does the research say?
That's right. There's evidence that it can go both ways. So you have studies with people in romantic relationships or mothers with their kids, and they have better synchrony with the people they love than they do with strangers. So
Yeah,
there's that side.
I would say that I experience the most synchrony with my partner, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that that feels very natural to all of us. But then you have studies where people don't know each other at all, and you get them to participate in some kind of synchronizing activity, and you see their brains start to sync up. And by the end of the session, they're flowing better with their partner. But what's really interesting to me is that sometimes people don't report that they feel more collaborative. You ask them at the end what their emotional or personal perceptions were of the experience. So they might not feel it, but they were better synchronized at the brain level and they still had better task outcomes than those who weren't. So even sometimes when you don't feel synchronized on an emotional level, that active synchrony can still lead to better results.
So that person that is sort of in the corner of the room, being too cool for the team building activity, they might still end up as a better team player.
Yes, if you can get them even to go through the motions, it might help out the whole team with whatever it is that they're working on.
Yeah. I think it's easy to see then, right? Where there is a role for synchrony in the workplace. So, quick question for everyone who is here right now. What do you think happens when we don't have synchrony? So, let us know in the chat. We can interact a bit there.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, how everyone here feels about it, because that's actually what triggered me to start looking into this was the issues you encounter when you're so misaligned and out of sync. So I feel there are consequences to not looking into this. I see, okay, ego fights, that's a good one.
Hmm.
You might sense more tension in the room or this feeling of being kind of stuck or disconnected as a team. Let's see. Yeah, without synchrony, it's energy draining. That's true. There's a big energy component to that too. Energy kind of fuels us and helps us. Femke said lack of motivation. I think when you have the energy instead of the draining, you're more motivated to keep going. And without it, you can also, yeah, difficult collaboration. You might have a hard time coming to a solution together. So there are consequences to not focusing on how in sync we are.
Yeah, I also saw low performance. So, yeah,
Mm,
teams that are better in sync definitely perform better.
absolutely.
So, I guess people are also wondering, right, how we can apply this in real life and overcome all of those barriers. What things do we need to practice?
Yes. Well, there are many things you can do because synchrony is happening at different levels. We talked about in the biological level and the
Mm.
emotional level. So in a minute, we'll look at four key ways to synchronize. And these will be things that you can apply on your own. You can apply it with your teams, and you can use it with the people that you want to serve. But I think it's really important that we start with ourselves first and how we're showing up in everyday interactions, because being present and open helps us to synchronize with the people in our lives, in work and outside of work. And it makes the collaboration more satisfying, conversations are more fluid. So people who experience synchrony at work actually report feeling more engaged, more motivated. So this is tapping also into some of these things you've all said into the
Mhm.
chat, and more connected to their own sense of purpose in what they do. So it's good for business because people are more motivated to show up and fully engage.
Yeah, I think it's also important for companies to make it clear to their employees that not only is it okay to take time for that type of connection, but it's being encouraged. So, especially when we have so many hybrid teams right now, in the past, you would go to the water cooler or the coffee machine to have those conversations. And some companies might have seen that as a waste of time, but actually, they go a long way in helping with team synchrony. And you can encourage this through your company's policies and systems as well. For example, we at Innate Motion have a code in our activity matrix where we put our hours and it says Innators meet. So this could be dinner with the people that are in town or a 30-minute catch up with just talking about life. And it's encouraged and part of company time.
Yeah, that's a really great point and a good place to start. And I also see an interesting question in the Q&A, which is, can synchrony also potentially be an obstacle or hinder more disruptive innovation? And I think that for some companies, they go, oh my gosh, people are wasting time. They're not talking about what's important. But it actually can help to improve the efficiency overall, but you do need to have a common goal. So you don't just hang out and chat and not get any work done. It's also about uniting people behind what it is that we're working toward together. So this ability to connect on a personal level helps with that. And it goes a long way. But of course, you can't let it just turn into like a social a social gathering when you're there for an
Exactly.
innovation workshop.
I was
Um,
just gonna say, I think this question also connects to you don't want to become just one blob of one thought, right? But synchrony actually promotes also that you can openly share your different ideas and bounce back on each other with them.
Yes. And let's break each of the points down now. So we have these four spaces we wanted to share with you. The first is eye contact and mirroring. The second one is story sharing and engaged listening. The third is rituals that are designed around a shared identity. And the fourth is rhythm with music and movement. So first we'll go into the eye contact one. And we've all heard about eye contact in conversation for ages, I'm sure. But now we're seeing what is that doing in the brain. And it helps to maintain mutual attention when you're in a conversation, and it activates the mirror neuron system. And this is a network in the brain that turns on not only when you perform an action, but also when you observe someone else performing that same action. And it's part of the neural process of empathy too. So eye contact, even over video, can absolutely go a long way. But obviously, this means you have to have your cameras on.
Yeah.
So when you're actually working together with people, it's good to be able to simulate that sense of eye contact.
Yeah, because it's so easy, right? If you have your camera off to start multitasking, but knowing all of this, you might want to be a bit more present from now on.
For sure. And by having the cameras on, this gives you the chance to mirror people subtly by matching their posture or their gestures or their facial expressions. And this also helps to activate the brain's mirror neuron networks. And it's been shown to increase empathy and alignment.
And of course, you don't want to be creepy with this, so keep it subtle and natural, but it can really help with a sense of like attunement and just showing that you're engaged.
Yeah, it's not about like playing copycat game or, staring people down. You just need to keep it natural. But that leads us into point number two, which is story sharing and engaged listening. And we call it story sharing because it should be a two-way conversation, not just a telling activity. And when we listen to stories, active listening, like nodding and verbal affirmations, shows alignment and it creates a mutual rhythm in the conversation. And that strengthens both the neural and the emotional connections.
Yeah, right. And sharing personal stories or listening to other stories, it leads to emotional synchrony, right? So it's this where taking the time for a little chat to go beyond how are you, good, this really goes a long way.
Yes, and then studies are showing that this brain activity is aligning between the storyteller and the listener when there's more emotional resonance. And you can dial up emotional resonance even more in teams and events if you think about shared identity and rituals. So this is our third point. And if you are a leader and you're working with your teams, you can build synchrony into your team's ways of working. And then if you're anyone who's planning a group event or a team project where you need to work toward any kind of successful outcome together, you can build it into your agenda. And this should help you get some better results.
Yeah. So when it comes to workplace culture, there's no one size fits all approach. The beauty is that you can sort of shape to reflect any kind of company and any group of people.
Hmm. Well, and that's where the collective identity part comes in. And that in itself is a strong foundation for getting people to be more aligned. So ours, for example, is that we are business humanizers. It's not a typical job title. And whatever your role or function is in innate motion, you are a business humanizer. And that's something that truly makes us excited to do our work. And it gives us a common and consistent goal. So once you have that identity in your own company, you can build in team rituals that align with that. And this can come through things like check ins, gratitude rounds, or even a shared breath at the beginning of a session. They're not fluff. Sometimes people think like it's taking up time or it's just something silly, but they send a signal that we're entering this space together.
Yeah, we forgot to do the shared breath at the beginning, no?
Oh, yes.
These can be designed also to be really specific to your team. So even to your whole identity as a group. And sometimes that invites also your customers to be part of it. So for example, at this udon franchise we worked with, there was a ritual to greet diners when they entered the restaurant. And the global company sort of adopted this Japanese ritual and it made them synchronize across borders. What it also did is it included the customers in the ritual and made them feel part of that culture. Um, I'm also really interested in the last point we'll discuss. So we started the webinar with this. Let's explore rhythm, music, and movement a bit more.
Okay, yeah, this one's fun. Music and rhythm are natural synchronizers, and that's why we started out with We Will Rock You. But if you think about our history and our cultures, music and dancing are pretty much a core piece of any culture. And we find that it's something so innate to us as humans in the way that we love to interact and share moments together. So if you think about the energy shift that happens when a great song plays or when a group is clapping in time, you can see how you can start to use music or rhythm in practical team moments. So you can use music to start a meeting. It's super subtle, but it gets everybody sort of in the same mood with the same song going on. Or you can do a rhythm-based game. Even small shared movements, like it doesn't have to be silly at all. It can just be having people stand up at the same time or doing a nice stretch together. This creates this physiological synchrony. And sometimes it might feel cheesy depending on the way you approach it. And sometimes it is, and that's fine. But it can totally shift the energy in the room. And research also shows that these coordinated movements build trust, co regulation, and connection with people. So it just helps to bring them into the same tempo, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, this also really makes me think of a recent workshop we did. So we worked with this team that was exploring a lot of new innovations that were related to the concept of sharing. And we kicked off the day with the song We Are Family because everybody knows it. And we invited them to join in a special sharing dance, so to say. And later in the day, when we played the song again, some of them said, like, oh, great, are we dancing again? So it sparked sort of this instant recognition and it lifted the energy in the room. Yeah, and that shared moment helped people feel more connected and more in sync. And it's that kind of simple, small, and meaningful rituals that reinforce a sense of collective efforts.
I love that. And I think it's really important to get creative with this. Like you said, there's no one size fits all solution, and it's about matching the synchrony activities you choose to the culture that you have so it doesn't feel out of place. And then that also helps people feel like they belong to something.
Yeah, right. And for instance, what they do at Netflix is not going to be the same as what they do in a hospital, right?
No.
So that's from an individual and team's perspective, but how about we talk what this looks like from an insights and branding perspective as well?
Yes. Okay. Well, this is one of my favorite things of my job. It's when we put clients in the same room with the people that they want to serve. And we have them go not as marketers talking to consumers, but really just as humans talking to humans. So this is where empathy and synchrony really start to come together. We create this space for real dialogues and for perspective taking, for listening deeply. And it's not just about getting better data, but it's about building that emotional resonance between people. And this opens up an entirely new level of insight and creativity that it helps our teams and our client teams to better innovate and to better communicate with their customers. So Bart, I know you have been working a lot with this at the insights level in your current projects. Tell me about what you've been up to with that.
Yeah, quite a lot. So to describe the process a bit, in the foundational stage of most of these projects, we collect these insights at a societal and cultural and category level. And we always want to tap into that deeper, more human learnings to help shape our approach in whatever project that we're working on. So we look at the shifts, the tensions, and when we share these learnings back with the team, we design for perspective taking rather than just sort of top-down learning. And what does it, we look at what does it mean for people? How are they experiencing it for real? And what can a brand do to play a role and help solve some of these tensions and things that people are dealing with?
Hmm. Well, and that's why I think it's important in our own team that our moderators and our researchers are trained in empathy, not just in insights mining, because we have to sense how to bring this into the reports and into the storytelling so we can help our own clients sense the people that they want to serve. And anybody who's in research, this is something you can do. You can actively apply it in every interaction. It really does add such a layer of richness. But we also train our clients to do this themselves through immersions.
Yeah, it's an incredible way to unlock sort of team growth. It's such a great experience for people, but it also unlocks growth for the brands. So it gives clarity on the purpose, and relating it to people with more depth, creating for them with more intentionality as well. So, Megan, do you have a favorite immersion story? I know you do.
Of course I do. Well, it's hard to choose because I have so many. First, let me just say what immersions are really quick for people who don't know. We call it immersion when we have a client come together with a consumer, but we don't like to use consumer because it's not just about consumption. It's really an active service. How can we better serve them? And these connects are not about research. They're really about building empathy. So that's where the synchrony side of things comes in. And one of my favorite ones, you asked Bart, my favorite story, I will never forget these immersions that I did in Ethiopia with a breakfast company. And we went there to talk with mothers about nutrition. And I remember being in this one home that was in this community of tiny houses, and all the kids were running around and playing outside. And the woman we were with was so sweet. She made me injera, which is this like spongy tart crepe. It's delicious for anybody who hasn't tried it. Ethiopian food is fantastic. I always remember the food, but I also remember the people. And the research that we did was just in the settings of these homes. We went to markets together, and it was just personal and full of life. And the outcome was getting to experience some of those universal needs that unite all of us. I mean, we all need to be nourished. Using food as a love language is something that comes through, and taking pride in our food as an expression of our culture. It's also quite a universal thing, but we also saw challenges they were facing that are not so universal. And the whole experience surfaced issues like trust and quality issues that supersede the norm. And these things were really important for our clients to pay attention to, because they were there for an innovation idea and they needed to see, is this going to work? So seeing that there's trust issues with boxed foods was a really important thing for them to learn. And this woman took us to the market and showed us how she buys her own grains and gets them milled, because there were deadly cases of contaminated food in box food. So the whole experience was just so rich. For the clients, it brought many revelations to consider as they were working on this innovation and deciding how to approach it. But it also brought these personal stories and experiences that will always shape the way that they're developing for their customers.
Wow, it's a really powerful story. And people are often a bit nervous, right, about this immersion. So they often are like a little bit like, what if I do it wrong? But in the end, it's about connecting to people and learning from them. And most of the time, people come back really glowing and excited to share. So it's important on our side to really design for the synchrony part.
Yes, for sure. And that comes from the start with how we build the interview guide. So we have synchrony in mind along the way. We always start with a relevant icebreaker. We design for the questions to tap into the emotional side of things, the rational side. We do projective exercises and build in things like play and creativity. And all of that works together to help synchronize people by the end of the conversation.
Yeah, it's really important to do it with intentionality, right? And to step outside of the box, maybe even outside of your comfort zone a bit. And in research, we need to then just move from observation to participation. So a step away from the one-way mirror into the face-to-face dialogue, and even a brief moment of that eye contact can spark this neural alignment. And yeah, we can also use creative tools like drawing prompts or storytelling cards. These can lower the defenses and foster more of that natural interaction. So sharing experiences together and these kinds of embodied movements activate synchrony and generate a lot of rich insights.
Yes. So let's take a second to just show these four areas we've just discussed. And I invite people to think, how can you start applying this in your own life, in your own work? Eye contact and mirroring was our first one. We had story sharing and engaged listening, rituals that we build around a collective identity, and rhythm with music and movement. So you all see a QR code here, and I'd like to hear from everybody who's still with us in attendance. Which synchrony tip will you try first? So if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to a Mentimeter, and you can just type in one or two words that's what you'll take away, something you could try today or tomorrow.
Yeah. And while people are doing that, we want to help make it easier to keep this human factor in the workplace and beyond as well, to bring more synchrony and real connections. So everyone who is here today, keep an eye out in your inbox for a little surprise.
Yes. And okay, I see we've got our Mentimeter results coming up. Rituals, that's the biggest one so far. I like honesty. That's not one we explicitly said, but I think it's so true. The rhythm, movement, empathy, story sharing. Okay, so we've got kind of across the board here that people are ready to try and experiment.
Yeah. Um, I think there's just two last things that we wanted to share with you, right? So first, we want to connect with you. Our LinkedIn's should be dropped in the chat right now. So please connect to us, say hi, share any of your questions and thoughts that you have there with us. And second, we always want to improve these webinars as well, to make sure that you're truly interested and that it's valuable for people. So we're going to leave a short feedback survey up on the screen, and we'd be really grateful if you'd answer it. So don't be afraid to be honest with us.
And also, before we close, I wanted to open up to if there are any questions in the audience, any curiosity around the topic. Will AI agents be able to enter in synchrony with humans? Ooh, that's a big one. That one, I am sure there are going to be studies around that soon, because we are starting to even see AI agents in research as therapists. They're showing up in ways that I think in the past we would have said, oh, AI will never be able to do these things. And here we are, and we see that AI is being used more for therapy than for Google style searches. So
Mm.
I don't know the answer to that yet, but I assure you, research is going to be popping up very soon to explore that exact question.
Yeah, and Marcella is asking, in your experience, what are some of the biggest obstacles that prevent synchrony from happening in these hybrids or remote teams? And how can leaders intentionally design around those challenges?
Yeah, that's a big one. We heard a lot about that with COVID, didn't we, Bart? People were like, "How do
Mhm.
you do this remotely?"
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead. I see you have a
Yeah, I think it all comes back to what we've been discussing, right? That intentionality and really putting some effort behind it. So you can make clear to your team that, as I said before, it's encouraged. So it's not just there for you to maybe do, but it's actually part of maybe even the job description to connect with people and to take that time to have a personal conversation. And yeah, I think, yeah,
yeah.
that's important.
Well, earlier we talked about how do you make it part of your systems? Like we
Mhm.
literally have an activity code for doing that. So it's something that I'm spending my time and I know where to put it. So you make it easy for people to log. But we also in our case, we start our calls always with a catch up. So maybe we're there to talk about a new project kickoff, but usually we'll spend
Yeah.
5 minutes or so in the beginning to just relate what's going on in your life, how are you doing? And that sort of sets the scene for the rest of the call and the interactions. So there are things that you can build in to make the work remotely more engaging for sure.
So I see there's two more questions. Let's see. We can, I think, answer one more. Megan, have you read Marcella's question?
Uh, Marcella's question? Oh,
So,
no, sorry, I missed that one. Okay,
so
so people don't feel, so you mentioned that synchrony can happen even when people don't feel emotionally in sync. How can we measure or recognize this kind of hidden synchrony in a business context, especially in research or in consumer-facing interactions? Well, from a measurement perspective, of course, we're not going to have people wearing EEG, we're not going to see at the brain level if people are truly synchronized. But I think that the measurements come in the outcomes and also in the experience of synchronizing. So even though sometimes it can have a better outcome when you don't feel it, most of the time, this process brings you into a space where you do feel it. Um,
mm,
but yeah, in terms of measurement, it's such a subjective thing. And that's also part of what makes it difficult to study because you're just asking people, well, how do you feel about it? And the definitions of feelings can also be different from one person to another. So it's a tricky thing to measure, but I think that it's very much felt and then it's seen in the outcomes of the work that you're doing.
yeah, exactly. I think we can answer this last question and then we round off. So, how do you suggest leaders balance the need for efficiency with the time and space required to build synchrony in a fast-paced environments. Yeah, that's a difficult one, right? We're all so busy. How do we build in more moments for this?
I think that you can focus on micro moments. Um,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be a big deal. Like, you don't have to have a whole session that's like, okay, team, we're here to synchronize. It's more about those tiny things that you do when you kick off a meeting. So you can have a quick 1 minute, 2 minute opening and closing ritual in your in-person or virtual sessions. And those tiny moments make it so that it's not combating with efficiency. It's not eating up time that you need to get your work done, but it's really just a part of the entire process. But you have to think about what those are in order for them to feel natural and for them to become habits. And then at some point, it's not even like a forced thing that you have to train people to do. It just becomes integrated into your culture.
Amazing. Yeah, totally agree. Make tiny rituals part of daily life, then clear things. Amazing. Well, I think that's it from our side, right? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We hope it was valuable. And if you have any feedback to help us improve sessions like this in the future, please let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you.